Hello, and welcome to your YouTube channel, Learn English Lab. Today's podcast topic name is Understanding American Sarcasm and Humor, Advanced English Listening Practice. So I want you to imagine this scenario for a second. You just spent like 3 agonizing weeks building this massively complex, macro-heavy master spreadsheet for your new American company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're just totally exhausted. So you go to save it, but you accidentally hit, the wrong keyboard shortcut.
Oh, no.
The screen flickers, it goes completely black, and the file is just permanently deleted, like irrecoverable.
That is a nightmare.
Right, and your coworker sitting next to you watches this whole thing happen, slowly turns to you with a completely deadpan expression and just says, "Great job."
Yeah.
Now, you know the word great, and you know the word job. Your IELTS score is, practically perfect. But in that exact moment, you are suddenly standing in this invisible cultural minefield.
You really are. And that minefield is exactly what we're mapping out today. Because the reality is, you can have flawless grammar. You can write emails that belong in a corporate textbook, right?
Totally.
And you can dominate a technical meeting. But true cultural fluency, that lives in the unwritten, invisible rules of humor.
It really does.
It's this layer of communication that completely changes the molecular structure of a conversation without changing a single vocabulary word.
Right. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're exploring that invisible layer, specifically American sarcasm and humor. But before we get into the mechanics of it, I think we need to talk about why this actually matters to you, the listener.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people might be listening and thinking, look, I'm just here to do my job. I don't need to be a stand-up comedian.
Right. They see it as an extra.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like an optional luxury, like putting a fancy bow on top of a car that, already drives perfectly well.
But it's not optional. Not at all. If you treat humor as a luxury, you're fundamentally misunderstanding what humor does in human psychology.
Yeah.
It's a critical social survival tool. Like, think about the underlying mechanics of a shared joke. When someone uses sarcasm with you and you get it, you are instantly signaling that you share the same reality.
Wow, yeah.
It builds immediate trust. It's a shortcut to intimacy. You are instantly on the inside of the group. But when you miss it,
you're completely stranded on the outside looking in.
Exactly.
And the craziest part is, the gap feels so vast, even if the vocabulary they used was like something a first grader would understand, it's incredibly isolating.
It is. It really is. So we need to fix that.
Yeah.
The goal here is to give you a real aha moment.
Love that.
We're going to break this down so that by the end of our deep dive, you have practical, actionable strategies for decoding these interactions. We want to transform those deer in the headlights moments of pure confusion into genuine opportunities for you to connect with the people around you.
Let's just jump straight into the deep end then. We have to start with the absolute foundational mechanic of American sarcasm. It's basically the opposite rule, but, it's trickier than it sounds.
Because we're dealing with verbal irony.
Yeah.
The technical definition is simple enough, right? The literal words you speak completely contradict the intended meaning you want to convey. But applying that in real-time conversation is notoriously elusive.
So true.
The classic textbook scenario is looking out the window during a torrential, miserable downpour. We're talking howling wind, flooded streets, and someone casually sipping their coffee says, "What a beautiful day." Which
is easy enough to catch because, well, the physical environment makes the joke super obvious.
Exactly.
But let's go back to that great job example from earlier, because that's the subtle stuff you face every day.
Right, the everyday workplace interactions.
Exactly. Think about the contrast. So scenario 1.
Yeah.
You just delivered a massive high-stakes presentation. You crushed it.
Good for you.
Right. Your colleague walks up, smiling, energetic, and says, "Great job." The literal meaning matches the intended meaning perfectly.
Exactly. It's a straightforward, frictionless interaction, no translation needed.
But in scenario 2, with the deleted spreadsheet, the literal words are identical. The syntax hasn't changed at all. The vocabulary is exactly the same, but the entire meaning has been inverted.
And this is where we have to look at what's actually happening inside your brain when you encounter this, especially when you're operating in a second language.
It's exhausting.
The cognitive load is staggering. I'm thinking of a story about a software engineer named Priya that perfectly illustrates this invisible mental labor.
Oh man, Priya's story. Yes. I want to share this one because it's so relatable.
Go for it.
So for context, Priya is this incredibly brilliant software engineer who had just moved from Hyderabad to Chicago for this hyper-competitive role.
High stakes.
very high stakes. And her technical English was completely flawless. But during her first month, she had this interaction that just left her spinning. She's in a morning stand-up meeting, and one of the senior developers, let's call him Mike, is presenting a solution to a software bug that's been causing issues for weeks.
And Mike's proposed solution was, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly elegant.
He was a disaster.
Yeah.
It was this convoluted, overly complex mess of code that made no logical sense. So Mike finally finishes his long, rambling explanation.
Right.
The room goes totally quiet for a second. Then another team member, Sarah, looks right at him and says, "Oh yeah, that is definitely the simplest approach."
Oh boy.
Instantly, the whole room bursts into laughter. Even Mike is laughing. But Priya is just sitting there, completely frozen.
What's fascinating here is that Priya's brain is doing precisely what it has been rigorously trained to do for years.
Evaluate the language literally.
Exactly. Evaluate it literally. She is actively running Sarah's comment against Mike's technical proposal, trying to solve the puzzle of how on earth that tangled mess of code could possibly be categorized as the simplest approach.
Right, because she thought she was missing some profound, high-level technical insight. She's evaluating the comment as pure data, not as a performance.
And we really have to validate how exhausting that is for you as a learner. When you are listening and processing a second language, your working memory is already operating near capacity.
Oh, yeah.
You're decoding the vocabulary, you're parsing the grammar, you're mapping those linguistic structures to actual meaning, all in real time. That is a massive amount of cognitive bandwidth.
It's a workout.
It really is. Now, throw sarcasm into the mix. Suddenly, your brain has to do all that foundational translation, realize that the literal meaning makes absolutely zero sense in the current context, and then actively run a reverse translation to find the inverted intention.
Wow.
It is an enormous amount of invisible, heavy lifting.
It makes me think of trying to solve a really complex calculus problem on a whiteboard.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Right. You're focused, you're doing the math, but while you're working, someone keeps sneaking up behind you and secretly changing the rules of arithmetic.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the plus sign means subtract, and the multiplication sign means divide. You look at your final answer and you think, am I completely losing my mind?
Oh, you're not.
No.
Yeah.
The problem isn't your math skills. Your logic is perfect. The problem is that the underlying rules of reality were flipped without anyone warning you.
That's a great way to look at it. Which brings up the most crucial question. If the literal words are identical, how do you spot the rule change?
Right.
How do you know when the plus sign has suddenly become a minus sign?
So how do you?
The answer lies in the performance. Sarcasm isn't just a linguistic phenomenon, you know. It is a highly physical and auditory performance.
Yes, that's so true. You can't just read a transcript of a conversation and reliably catch sarcasm. You really have to be there to witness the delivery.
Exactly. We rely heavily on paralinguistic cues.
Paralinguistic cues.
Yeah, these are all the elements of communication that float alongside the actual words. So tone of voice, timing, facial expressions, body language, and even the strategic use of silence.
Silence is a big one.
It's huge. When an American English speaker wants to signal a sarcastic inversion, they will almost always alter the prosodic cues. That means they change the rhythm, the stress, and the pitch of their speech.
Let's actually demonstrate this, because it's so subtle if you aren't listening for it.
Let's do it.
Take the phrase, "oh, fantastic." If I'm genuinely thrilled, let's say you just told me our project got fully funded, I'm going to say, "oh, fantastic."
Right, you sound happy.
Yeah, my pitch goes up, my eyes probably widen, my pacing is quick, and I'm physically leaning into the conversation.
But let's say I tell you that my basement just flooded with 3 feet of muddy water, and you respond sarcastically.
Oh.
That entire physical and vocal performance completely reverses.
So I'd say, "oh, fantastic."
Yeah.
The pitch totally drops. The delivery slows way down. The voice gets flat, maybe a little raspy or heavy. And visually, there's an eye roll, or a heavy sigh, or just a deadpan stare.
The way we stretch the vowels is a huge giveaway, too.
Well, for sure.
There is a world of difference between a quick, sharp, sure, meaning I agree, and a long, drawn-out, sewer.
Sewer. Yeah, that feels completely different.
That elongation of the vowel is crucial. It's essentially a flashing neon sign telling the listener, I absolutely do not believe what you just said, or I'm reluctantly agreeing while fully registering my disapproval.
Right.
It's an entirely separate language layered perfectly over the primary one. And the visual cues are a vocabulary all their own. You know, the raised eyebrow, the half smirk, the highly specific knowing look shared between two people who are mutually in on the joke.
Okay, But this raises a massive red flag for the modern workplace.
Uh-oh, what is it?
Well, if sarcasm relies entirely on this complex physical vocal performance, what happens when we strip all of that away?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. What happens when we migrate this entire dynamic to a text message, an email, or a Slack channel?
Absolute chaos. Frankly, it's a miracle we communicate digitally at all.
Really, though.
When you remove the vocal inflection, the timing, and the facial expressions, you destroy the very mechanisms humans have evolved to signal sarcastic intent. And to be clear, this isn't just a hurdle for language learners. Native speakers constantly misinterpret each other in text.
Oh, I've had to do the digital apology tour so many times.
We all have.
You send a message meant to be a lighthearted, sarcastic joke, and the recipient takes it completely literally and is deeply offended. It's a nightmare.
It really is.
But what's fascinating is how we've culturally adapted to this void. Americans have essentially built out a whole new digital ecosystem, right? Like a set of typographical conventions just to compensate for those lost physical cues.
We had to invent new ways to wink through a screen.
Yes.
And these conventions evolve incredibly fast. Take the acronym ALL.
Ooh, this is good.
Decades ago, it strictly meant laughing out loud. It was a literal description of an action. But over time, its function has shifted dramatically. Today, people constantly put a lol to statements that aren't funny in the slightest.
They really do. Like, I'm going to be 3 hours late, lol.
Exactly. In these contexts, lol functions as a sarcasm tag or a tone indicator. It softens the blow of the statement and explicitly signals, do not take what I just typed literally or aggressively.
It's like a digital pressure release valve.
It really is.
And then you have emojis, which are doing the heavy lifting for digital sarcasm right now. The upside-down smiley face is the absolute king of this.
Oh, the upside-down smiley is iconic.
Right. If you text someone, just drop my laptop down a flight of stairs, and they reply with an upside-down smiley, it conveys this perfect sense of ironic, helpless resignation.
Totally.
Or the smirking face emoji, which instantly implies, I'm just teasing you. We even use basic punctuation as a sarcasm marker.
The trailing dots, the ... is a perfect example of that grammatical adaptation.
Right, the ellipsis. Although, funny enough, we're not using that punctuation mark in our script today, but we all know what it is.
Yes, the 3 dots.
Exactly. If a coworker messages you and asks, are you ready for the massive audit tomorrow? And you reply, sure, with a period. That is a concrete statement of fact. You are ready.
A very confident period.
Yes. But if you reply, sure, followed by those 3 trailing dots, that completely changes the meaning. It implies a heavy digital sigh.
It means you are absolutely terrified.
Right. You are not ready at all, but you're ironically pretending to be fine.
And we're seeing internet communities develop even more explicit coding for this. On forums like Reddit, you'll frequently see the /s flag.
The /s.
Yeah, literally just a / followed by an s placed at the very end of a comment. It is a direct, explicit marker indicating that the entire preceding paragraph was sarcastic.
That's amazing.
It's a community-driven solution to a real linguistic deficit. They literally had to invent a sarcasm punctuation mark.
We should probably break down some specific vocabulary here too, because there are certain phrases in digital communication that have become almost universally recognized as sarcastic.
Good idea.
Like the literal meaning has essentially been erased. For instance, if you text a friend a wild, highly improbable story and they reply, yeah, right.
Oh, classic.
They absolutely do not mean, yes, that is correct. They mean, I think you are completely lying to me.
Another one that trips people up is, oh, totally.
Oh, yeah, that one is tricky.
If a manager messages you at 4:55 p.m. and says, do you want to stay until 9 p.m. on a Friday to finish this deck? And you reply, oh, totally. You are actually screaming, absolutely not.
Right. It's total resentment wrapped up in agreement. And then, of course, there's good luck with that.
Oh, that's a classic. Good luck with that is almost never a genuine wish for success.
Never.
If a junior employee says they're going to march into the CEO's office and demand a 4-day work week, and you say, good luck with that, you're really saying, that is a spectacularly terrible idea, and I can't wait to watch it fail.
So true. So we've covered the mechanics. We know the how of sarcasm, both in person and on a screen, but we really need to pivot to the why.
Yes, intention matters so much.
Why do we use this complicated, risky form of communication at all? Because the intention behind the sarcasm is the difference between building a bridge and burning one down completely.
This is such a critical distinction. We're talking about the divide between affiliative sarcasm and aggressive sarcasm.
Affiliative versus aggressive.
Exactly. Affiliative sarcasm is the bonding kind. It's designed to bring people closer together. Aggressive sarcasm is the weaponized kind. It's meant to wound, to diminish, and to create a hierarchy.
Let's ground this with an example of affiliative sarcasm.
Okay.
Imagine you're meeting up with a really close friend for coffee. You decided to take a risk and wear a very bold, brightly colored, maybe slightly ridiculous new jacket.
A fashion statement.
Exactly. Your friend takes one look at you, shakes their head, smirks, and says, "Wow, who are you trying to impress today?"
Okay, stop right there. Because if you come from a culture where respect is shown through politeness, that sounds like a direct insult.
Oh, 100%.
But in American culture, that playfully merciless roasting is practically a love language. It signals an incredibly deep level of trust.
Exactly. You only deploy that kind of joke with someone if you are absolutely certain the relationship is secure enough to handle the friction.
Yes.
The unwritten subtext of that insult is, we are so close and our bond is so strong that I can openly mock you and we both know my affection for you hasn't changed.
But wait, I have to challenge this because if I'm a language learner, that feels so counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, if I've spent my entire life learning that you show respect by being differential, formal, and earnest, and suddenly my new American friend is essentially insulting my clothes to my face, my immediate physiological reaction is going to be defensive. I'm going to feel hurt.
And that's a completely natural reaction.
Yeah.
It's deeply jarring.
It is.
But the necessary cultural translation you have to make in your head is that the roast is an invitation. If they are teasing you, they are signaling acceptance. The more comfortably they tease you, the more integrated into the group you actually are.
It's like they're testing the structural integrity of the friendship, and by taking the joke, you prove the bridge is strong.
That's a great metaphor.
But that brings us to a really dangerous minefield. Because what happens when you take that exact same sarcastic mechanism, but you apply it to a situation where the people aren't equals?
Oh, like in the workplace. The chemistry completely changes and it turns toxic almost instantly.
It really does. This is where we have to talk about power dynamics and aggressive sarcasm in the workplace. Sarcasm directed downward in a hierarchy, say, from a boss to a subordinate, carries a massive amount of risk.
Because the subordinate can't fight back.
Exactly. They are trapped. Let's say an employee misses a relatively minor deadline. The manager calls them in, looks at them, and says, "Oh, so you thought the deadline was just a suggestion."
Ouch. Just hearing that makes my stomach drop.
Because in that context, it's not a bonding exercise, it is pure humiliation.
Yeah.
The employee is trapped. They can't comfortably fire back with their own sarcastic quip because their livelihood is on the line.
Right, they can't say, yeah, pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sarcasm is masking genuine aggressive criticism behind a thin, cowardly veil of humor. It makes it impossible for the employee to defend themselves because if they do, the manager can just say, "Whoa, relax, I was just joking. Can't you take a joke?"
Gaslighting, basically.
This is aggressive sarcasm, and it destroys trust.
So if you're navigating this as a learner, how do you handle it? Because it feels like walking on eggshells.
It really does.
I think the golden rule we need to emphasize here is this. If you're ever unsure about how a comment is going to land, if you have even a shadow of a doubt about the power dynamic or the cultural context of the room, always err on the side of sincerity.
That is the ultimate safety net. Sincerity will never get you fired.
So true.
You can always dial up the humor and the sarcasm weeks or months later once you have safely mapped out the social terrain and you deeply understand the relationships. But you can almost never unring the bell of a sarcastic comment that someone misinterpreted as a genuine, aggressive insult.
Start sincere, then cautiously experiment.
I like that. Start sincere.
Now, we've been focusing heavily on sarcasms that has an edge, like a specific tone or attitude, but we need to transition to a style of humor that relies on having absolutely zero emotion whatsoever. Let's talk about the art of deadpan delivery and dry humor.
Dry humor is fascinating because it fundamentally breaks the rule we established earlier about paralinguistic cues.
Right.
We said sarcasm relies on exaggerated tones, pitch drops, and eye rolls. Deadpan delivery relies entirely on the complete, unsettling absence of those signals.
It's so weird when you think about it.
It's the act of saying something utterly absurd, highly exaggerated, or deeply disastrous while maintaining a completely serious, unexpressive, stony demeanor.
The comedy lives entirely in the contrast. It's the massive gap between how chaotic the story is and how completely calm the storyteller's face is.
Let me give you a scenario.
Please do.
A coworker comes back from a 2-week vacation. You ask them how it went. They look at you with dead eyes, no smile, a completely flat, monotonous voice, and they say, it was magical. I got severe food poisoning on the second day. The airline permanently lost my luggage, so I wore the same pair of socks for a week, and it rained for 12 consecutive days. Best trip of my life.
If you were just analyzing the audio waveform of their voice, you'd think they were reading the terms and conditions of a software update.
Yes. The humor requires the listener to actively process the absurdity. You have to intellectually step back and realize, wait, nobody actually considers food poisoning and lost luggage to be the best trip of their life. This is a performance.
And there's a really interesting cross-cultural dimension we have to touch on here, too. Because dry humor isn't just an American export.
No, not at all.
In fact, the British are essentially the architects of it. But they do it differently, don't they?
They do, and the divergence is really interesting. American deadpan, like the vacation story I just told, almost always ends with a clear, ironic anchor.
The anchor.
Yes. The phrase, best trip of my life, acts as a heavy-handed, sarcastic exclamation point that retroactively confirms to the listener, yes, everything I just said was a joke.
Right, it gives you permission to laugh.
But British dry humor is famously much more stoic and understated.
Good.
A British speaker might politely and meticulously describe that exact same disastrous vacation in agonizingly polite detail, but they might completely omit that final sarcastic punchline.
Oh, well.
They will just describe the rain and the lost luggage and then take a sip of tea. They force the listener to do all the inferential heavy lifting to figure out if it's a joke or a tragedy.
It's like they lead you right to the edge of the cliff of the joke, but they refuse to push you over. You have to be brave enough to jump yourself.
That is exactly what it is.
And speaking of throwing yourself off a cliff, let's pivot to a form of humor where you are intentionally throwing yourself under the bus.
Yeah.
Self-deprecating humor. This is where you are the punchline.
Self-deprecation is a cornerstone of American social interaction, and it's a very specific, highly calibrated performance of vulnerability.
We hear it all the time. You might be venting about a frustrating customer service call and say, I've been on hold at the cable company for 45 minutes, which honestly is totally on brand for my life.
Very common.
Or maybe you're trying to format a slide deck, the text boxes go rogue, the image is upside down, and you just gesture broadly at the chaotic screen and say, graphic design is clearly my passion.
And this is exactly where literal language learners fall into a painful trap.
Oh, so painful.
When a native speaker deploys self-deprecating humor, you have to understand that these are absolutely not cries for help. They are not seeking pity, and they are not looking for genuine validation. It's actually the complete inverse. By making yourself the target of the joke, you are paradoxically demonstrating an intense amount of social confidence.
Wait, how does insulting yourself show confidence?
Because you are signaling to the room, I am so secure in my overall competence, my status, and my intelligence that I can afford to shine a spotlight on my minor, trivial flaws. It immediately disarms people. It makes the speaker seem highly approachable, relatable, and grounded.
But the painful friction happens when a learner takes those statements at face value. It creates this incredibly awkward tension.
It really does.
Imagine you're at a dinner party. The host is bringing out the main course, but they accidentally burnt the garlic bread. They laugh, roll their eyes, and say, well, as you can see, I am an absolute disaster in the kitchen.
Standard host behavior.
Right. Now imagine you trying to be a deeply empathetic, supportive friend, looking at them with total sincerity and saying, oh, I'm so sorry. That must be very difficult for you to struggle with that. Maybe you should look into taking a beginner's cooking class.
Oh, the silence in that dining room would be deafening.
It would be physically painful.
It really would. Because you didn't just miss the joke. You accidentally validated their self-insult. You took a lighthearted, confident performance and turned it into a genuine, serious critique of their abilities.
Yeah, you essentially just insulted them back, but seriously.
Exactly. The crucial skill you have to develop here is learning how to play along. When someone uses self-deprecating humor, the expected social response is to chuckle, maybe offer your own minor self-deprecating story in solidarity to level the playing field and keep the conversation moving.
It's a dance. You have to hear the music they're playing.
Which brings us perfectly to the tactical part of this deep dive. We've explored the theories, the mechanics, the pitfalls, and the cultural nuances. But how do you, as a listener, actually start practicing this without feeling completely overwhelmed by all these unwritten rules?
You need a framework. We need to give you the tactical toolkit. And the first tool in that kit is the vocabulary of humor itself. There are specific idiomatic phrases that Americans use constantly to describe these exact social dynamics, and you must know them to navigate these situations successfully.
The absolute most essential one is the phrase, read the room. We touched on this earlier, but we need to break it down. To read the room means to actively scan the emotional atmosphere, the stress levels, and the social hierarchy of a space before you open your mouth.
It's about taking the psychological temperature.
Right.
I like to think of it like a submarine using sonar. When you enter a new social situation, you shouldn't just launch a massive, heavy, sarcastic torpedo of a joke right away.
No, bad idea.
You send out a small, safe, conversational ping, maybe a mild observation about the coffee, or a completely harmless, self-deprecating comment about the weather. Then you listen to how the room bounces that signal back.
Do they laugh? Do they ignore it?
Exactly. Do they escalate the humor? You read the sonar return before you make your next move. If a team just lost a major client and the mood is somber, someone who bursts in making loud, aggressive jokes has fundamentally failed to read the room.
That sonar metaphor is perfect. Another crucial concept you need to know is the idea of a joke landing versus falling flat.
Landing and falling flat.
Notice the language there. We don't just objectively say a joke was funny or not funny. We treat humor like an airplane.
That's a great way to put it.
If a joke lands, it means the pilot, the speaker, navigated the delivery smoothly, the audience understood the premise, they caught the subtle sarcasm, and they laughed appropriately. A safe landing.
But if a joke falls flat, it's like doing a belly flop into a concrete pool.
Painful.
It means you delivered the joke, but the delivery was off, or the audience didn't share the context, and the response was just that agonizing, awkward, drawn-out silence.
And the final piece of this essential vocabulary is the concept of being in on the joke. This is a profound marker of social inclusion.
Being in on it.
Being in on the joke means you possess the shared background knowledge required to understand why something is funny. If 3 coworkers are laughing hysterically about a hyper-specific, weird incident that happened at the 2019 corporate retreat and you weren't hired until 2021, you cannot be in on the joke.
You literally lack the data.
Exactly. You are physically present in the room, but you are culturally excluded from the moment.
And one of the biggest, most impenetrable barriers to being in on the joke in American culture is pop culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Pop culture isn't just entertainment. It acts as this massive, pervasive cultural shorthand. We use quotes from movies, TV shows, and internet memes to communicate highly complex emotions in just a few words.
It's a wildly efficient form of communication, but it operates entirely on the assumption that the listener shares the same reference database. If your database is empty, the language sounds like nonsense.
Let's break down a few specific ones so you know exactly what we mean.
Good call.
If someone in a meeting says something that could accidentally be interpreted as a double entendre, or sounds mildly inappropriate out of context, and someone else instantly yells, "That's what she said."
Oh, man.
Right. They are directly referencing a long-running joke from the sitcom The Office. It is practically a spinal reflex for an entire generation of Americans.
It really is.
Or, if a project is completely doomed, the budget is gone, and a manager just sighs, accepts defeat, and says, "I am inevitable," they are referencing the villain Thanos from the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
They're equating their project's failure to an unstoppable cosmic force.
Or consider the visual memes that have totally bled into spoken language. You will very often hear people casually say, "This is fine," when everything around them is going wrong.
Yes, the burning dog.
Exactly. They are referencing a very specific internet comic strip of a cartoon dog sitting at a kitchen table. The entire room is completely engulfed in roaring flames, but the dog is just calmly drinking a cup of coffee, eyes wide, saying, "This is fine."
Such a great meme.
It is the ultimate cultural expression of deadpan denial in the face of absolute disaster.
Right. And if you don't know about the dog in the burning room, you miss the entire emotional resonance of the phrase. You just think they're literally saying the situation is fine.
Which is confusing.
So how do we fix this database gap? Here are 3 actionable strategies for you to start implementing today.
Okay, we'll lay them out.
Strategy number 1, deliberate media immersion. And I want to emphasize the word deliberate. I do not mean just having Netflix playing on your TV in the background while you scroll through your phone on the couch.
No, passive listening will not build the specific cognitive skill. You have to watch with an analytical, almost scientific lens.
Yeah, okay, go.
When a character makes a joke and the laugh track plays, pause the show. Actively ask yourself, what were the literal words? What was the underlying meaning? Did their pitch drop? Did they roll their eyes? Was it a pop culture reference?
You really have to study it like a textbook. And the curriculum out there is amazing. If you want to master deadpan delivery, the comedy of awkward silences, and reading the room poorly, watch The Office.
Great choice.
If you want to understand observational humor, the kind where you point out the ridiculous unwritten rules of waiting in line at a bakery or trying to park a car, watch Seinfeld.
Classic.
If you want a masterclass in how different humor styles collide, like extreme relentless optimism clashing with extreme dry sarcasm, watch Parks and Recreation. And if you really want to challenge yourself and explore the British tradition of understated, fourth wall breaking irony, watch Fleabag.
Strategy number 2 is what we call sarcasm spotting. Eventually, you have to take the training wheels off and observe this in the wild. Make a private internal game out of it.
Like a safari.
Yes, exactly. When you're sitting in a coffee shop or when you're observing a team meeting, don't worry about actively being funny yourself yet. Just observe.
Just watch.
Try to notice that microsecond pause before a coworker delivers a deadpan line. Watch for the subtle, unspoken shift in eye contact when two friends share an affiliative, sarcastic comment across the table.
And when you finally feel that your sonar has mapped the room and you feel ready to jump in and try it yourself, start safe.
Very important.
The absolute safest entry point into American humor is self-directed sarcasm about universally frustrating topics. Specifically, the weather or technology.
Oh, yes.
If the office printer jams for the 5th time that morning, you can just sigh, look at it and say, clearly, modern technology is my greatest strength. It is safe, it is entirely self-deprecating, and everyone in the room can relate to the frustration. You aren't attacking anyone.
Strategy number 3 is highly practical. You need to build a personal humor vocabulary. Listen, you do not need to be a stand-up comedian inventing brilliant, highly original jokes on the fly.
No, that's way too much pressure.
You just need to collect prefabricated phrases that native speakers use as social shortcuts.
Keep a literal list in the Notes app on your phone. It is so incredibly important that we validate this because the genuine pain and the isolation of this process is almost never talked about in formal language courses.
They skip right over it.
They teach you grammar, but they don't teach you how lonely it feels. Imagine being a highly educated, deeply intelligent professional. You have complex thoughts, you have a vibrant, hilarious personality in your native language.
Right.
And then you are sitting in a break room in Chicago or New York. The whole room erupts into laughter over a joke you completely missed. And you are just sitting there with a frozen, forced smile on your face.
It hurts.
It could feel incredibly infantilizing. It makes brilliant people genuinely question their own intelligence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand fundamentally that missing a joke is absolutely not a deficiency in your intelligence.
Thank you.
It is purely a reflection of the extraordinary cognitive load of multilingual, cross-cultural communication. As we discussed earlier, your brain is performing real-time linguistic and cultural gymnastics that monolingual speakers cannot even begin to fathom.
They have no idea.
When you miss a joke, or when you bravely try to make a joke and it falls totally flat, you cannot internalize that as a personal failure. You have to reframe it. These misunderstandings are just data points.
Data points.
They are the necessary friction for cultural learning. Every awkward silence, every missed reference is teaching you the precise boundaries of the local humor.
I absolutely love that perspective. Data points, not failures. Because the ultimate goal here, the light at the end of the tunnel, is so beautiful. Humor is where your personality actually lives in a language.
It really is.
When you are just translating vocabulary directly to get a job done, you are just transmitting data. You're a machine.
Yeah.
But when you make someone genuinely laugh in a second language, when you successfully deploy a perfectly timed deadpan comment and you see the surprise and delight light up a native speaker's face, it is profoundly liberating.
It truly is. It is the exact moment you transition from being a language learner to simply being a communicator. You transcend the mechanics.
It's not just the icing on the cake of fluency. It is how you reclaim your true personality, your wit, and your unique perspective in English. It is how you show the new world who you really are.
Which brings us to a moment of reflection on everything we have unpacked in this deep dive.
Let's recap the massive journey we just took. We started by uncovering the foundational rule of sarcasm. the inversion of meaning, the cognitive heavy lifting of the, say, the opposite rule.
Right.
We explored how to read the vital paralinguistic performance, the pitch drops and the drawn-out vowels, and how those physical cues translate into the chaotic digital world through emojis, tone tags, and specific punctuation.
Which we all need help with.
Truly. Then we navigated the treacherous waters of power dynamics, learning the crucial difference between affiliative bonding sarcasm and aggressive downward wounding sarcasm.
Very important distinction.
We broke down the stoic art of deadpan delivery and the confident vulnerability of self-deprecation. And finally, we equipped you with actionable strategies, analyzing pop culture deliberately, practicing sarcasm spotting with your conversational sonar, and building your own prefabricated humor vocabulary.
And as we wrap up, this raises an incredibly important question, a final provocative thought for you to ponder.
Let's hear it.
We have talked extensively today about American and British regional variations and how specific these unwritten rules can be to a physical location. But as internet memes, global social media platforms, and international remote work continue to aggressively blend cultures across borders, are we currently witnessing the birth of a universal digital dialect of sarcasm?
Wow.
Will the upside-down smiley face, the trailing dots, and the /s flag eventually completely overwrite traditional regional differences? Could we be moving toward a globally understood, standardized language of irony? It is a fascinating evolution of human communication, and it's happening right before our eyes on every screen we look at.
It really makes you wonder what humor will look like and how we will study it in 20 years. Will there even be a difference between American and British digital sarcasm? But for now, returning to where we started, the X-ray machine for language fluency might be broken. The rules of humor might be muddy, completely unwritten, and constantly shifting under your feet. But you are no longer walking into those muddy waters blindly. You have the tools, you have the vocabulary, and you deeply understand the underlying mechanics of the performance. You are finally ready to start reading the room. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.